Hey everyone, I'm Jay Scherr and welcome to Business Minds Coffee Chat. This is where remarkable people gather to share insights, lift and inspire, and deliver actionable content. Are you fulfilled, happy, and living your life's purpose? Are you able to master your feelings, demand your best every day, and maximize your potential? Well, buckle up because on this episode, we're going deep in these areas and more. Our guest today is an executive coach, speaker, and author. He earned his PhD in educational psychology from UC Berkeley and is an expert in positive psychology and emotions. He was one of 3 emotion experts to consult on Pixar's Academy Award-winning movie, Inside Out. He coaches clients to perform at their peak and achieve greater success and happiness at work and at home. His impressive list of clients has included Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, CEOs, elite athletes, and high net worth individuals. He's spoken to organizations such as Stanford Medical School, Kaiser Permanente, UC Berkeley, Sutter Health, and UPS, and has been featured in national media such as U.S. News and World Report, Reader's Digest, and Self Magazine. Please welcome the founder of Guide to Self, the host of the Evolved Caveman podcast, author of the award-winning book, How Can I Be Happy? And one of the top positive psychology blogs, Shrunken Mind, Dr. John Schinnerer. So let's get that right.
Thanks.
All right.
My growing up, my teachers could never pronounce it right. And the joke in the family is my sister couldn't pronounce it right till she was 15. So you're in good company.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. So I thought a great place for us to start, John, would be with where your story begins and what led you to the work that you're doing today.
Let's see, you got a few hours. So I think, it started back in high school when I was just killing myself to be quote unquote, or to prepare myself, I suppose, to be successful. And I was doing what the adults around me, including my parents, told me I needed to do. And so I was doing things as a senior in high school, like taking AP courses, getting good grades. I was student body president. I was captain of 3 varsity teams. And I realized at the age of 17 that in this word success, I didn't see any room for things like happiness, relaxation, contentment. And so I started questioning at that age, because what I found at that age was I was depressed some of the time, I was anxious some of the time, I was stressed all the time, I was exhausted all the time. And it really started me questioning that. And, it worked. I got into a great college, Pomona College. And eventually got into a PhD program at Cal. And I really wanted to find out more about the emotional side of my mind, because I'd always been a pretty smart kid. But where I kept getting tripped up were these damn emotions, anger, sadness, stress, anxiety. And that's when I would do things that were sort of the dumbest or most shameful or most embarrassing things in my life, was when my emotional mind was in charge of me, not when I was calm, cool, and collected. So I went to Cal. Cal was more about cognitive psych, which is about how we think. So I didn't really get what I was looking for there. I had to get out of Cal before I could really research it in more in depth, because emotions are squishy and soft. They're hard to do research on. And became a school psychologist, started working with students. One of the things that I realized when I was working with high school students is that emotions are contagious. So you can pick up emotions from other people if you don't have awareness, if you don't have training to do otherwise. So these high school students were coming in and they're sharing their stories of, the stories were filled with anger, fear, sadness, guilt, shame, and rightfully so. I mean, some were worried about getting jumped by gangs on the way home. Some were worried about alcoholic fathers beating them. I mean, heavy stuff. And without awareness, I was picking up their emotions, and it ended up with me getting depressed. And when we get depressed, inflammation in the body increases. So any of the old injuries that you have tend to come back. For me, it's low back. So I was kind of depressed. My back starts, my back goes out and I'm in pain. And I remember I was lying on the floor thinking to myself, okay, this makes no sense. Like here I am, a psych trained at Cal, and I still can't manage my emotions. If I can't do it, how can I teach them to? So at that point, I made a conscious decision to learn the best scientifically proven tools to manage that darker side of things. So fear, anger, sadness, guilt, shame, and all the variations. And it worked. So that was things that I could teach my clients at that point. At that point, shortly after I got disgusted with the public school system, and it's a whole nother story I won't go into, but I created a entrepreneurial venture with a classmate of mine where we started doing pre-employment testing for large companies online. And this was back in 2005. And it worked very well. So we started working with big companies like UPS. And it went well for about 7 years. The economy tanked, and so did my business. So that was kind of one of my lessons in business in terms of cyclical and counter-cyclical businesses. And then I had to reinvent myself. And, interestingly, I got depressed again when the business failed, because then I had to go to friends and family and tell them their shares were now worthless. So, because we men tie up so much of our identity in what we do, our work, that often cuts us off at the knees when things go badly. But after I picked myself up, after a couple months, I started getting into positive psychology, which is basically the scientific pursuit of happiness and well-being. And I started reading hundreds of studies. And this to me was manna from heaven. Because it was all about positive emotions. It was about meaning. It was about engagement. It was about how do we find purpose in life? And I thought, wow, this is awesome. Now I have tools to turn down the volume on the negative and tools to turn up the volume in the positive.
Yeah.
So I started writing kind of compulsively, and I wrote like 600 pages of a rough draft of how to coach people towards a happy and successful life. Because I really feel like what's missing in our success definition is happiness, positive emotions, and often meaning. But so I had this rough draft for a book. Went to a Christian businessman's networking breakfast that is kind of a weird place for me because I consider myself spiritual but not religious. Mm-hmm. Sat next to a guy who owned a Christian radio station. We talked a few times. He said, "John, I want to put you on the air. I want to give you your own radio show." And my response was, "Oh shit." Because certainly Cal had never taught me to do live radio. I didn't. I mean, depression's a little bit of my makeup. Anxiety's a little bit of my makeup. And this idea scared the crap out of me because it was a huge signal, like 10 million, it covered 10 million people.
Oh, nice.
Now, I don't know how many actually listened. Could have been 10, but in my mind, it was 10 million. And so I would write like 30 pages of script a day just so I'd have something to say. And I was terrible at the beginning, but slowly kind of relaxed into it, learned how to tell a joke without any response because you don't hear anyone laughing afterwards. And got to interview a number of world-class experts, which was awesome because I kept learning as I was doing it. And then stopped that to open up private practice. And when I opened up private practice in Danville, California, not Virginia, but I wanted to focus on positive psychology, but in 2006, 2007, the response was pretty lukewarm because people tend to come in for points of pain more so than points of pleasure. Because we know in the human mind, the negativity bias, we tend to overfocus on the negative thoughts, negative emotions, negative self-definitions. So I flipped it with the suggestion of a psychiatrist friend of mine. I went to anger management combined with positive psychology. And then things started taking off. And I worked almost exclusively with men, adults, and teenagers. But I realized pretty quickly that my business model is garbage, in the sense that I have to work an hour to get paid an hour. So if I go on vacation, I don't get paid. If I get sick, I don't get paid. Terrible business model. I don't recommend it. So I started coming up with this idea of doing an online course. So I created an online course for anger management for men because the people advising me, said, find a niche. I said, okay, great. There's got to be millions of men out there that need these tools. So I created this online video course, put it up live, immediately started getting hundreds of emails from angry women all around the world. Kind of, hey buddy, we're pissed off too. What about us? So I was like, shit, I don't know. Like, it's not personal. But I changed it and made it for everyone. And
smart move.
that was what led to consulting with Pixar, because they needed help on anger for Inside Out, which was an amazing experience. And then, after about 10 years of doing that, I got tired of working with that angry teen population. It's hard work. It's like slogging through mud. And I switched more to executives and businessmen who, no surprise, also many have an issue with anger to some degree. And in working with them, I realized pretty quickly that a lot of these men were highly successful, had made lots and lots of money, and had climbed the corporate ladder. But their biggest point of pain was at home with their relationships, with spouse, partner, teenage kids. So I shifted more to relationship skills to teach them how to be better in relationship, which led to this more recent work in masculinity and the man box culture, which is all about how we're socialized as boys, how it impacts us as men, particularly in our relationships. And I think it truly undermines our shot at happiness because, well, I can get into that more if you want to, but and then what do we do about that?
So I do want to talk about that. You've dropped some great information, but there's some data points that I'm listening to that I want to go back to for just a moment. And thank you for sharing your background with us. I appreciate it, because that gives us a really good context for what you're doing today, how you evolved, and from a business perspective, there were many different iterations that you went through, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were listening to the feedback that you received and continued to adapt to be able to meet the needs that you were hearing about or that you saw in the marketplace. But going back for a moment, one of the points that you made was when you had started the company with a colleague from UC Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
That particular business, you gave kind of a general overview of what that business was doing, but were you using social dynamics and psychology in that business to do the pre-vetting, if you will, of these potential employees?
Yeah, what the context at the time or the environment was that most companies that were doing pre-employment testing were only looking at one aspect of an applicant. So it was things like ethics, which don't actually, interestingly, doesn't predict job performance very well, but who wants an unethical employee? You can't test IQ on its own, although that's the best predictor of job performance. It was personality traits. It was job-related knowledge, but they weren't combined. And so we combined everything into a comprehensive assessment and then also added an IQ component to that, which you can do as part of an assessment. And the results were off the charts. I mean, we helped UPS reduce turnover in the package handler position by 33%, which saved them millions of dollars in an industry with really tight margins.
You mentioned that you went through a period of depression
Mm-hmm.
after that business closed. How were you able to navigate that? And were you receiving help yourself? Had you reached out to mentors, coaches? What was the process like in you working through that pain, working through that depression to come out the other side of it?
Well, I think at first I was just, curled in a fetal position in my office, hiding under the desk. It's a little bit of an overstatement, but not much. And then, kind of slowly, after a couple of weeks, began to look for help and began to talk to friends, saw a therapist, and began to do, to me, when I have clients that are in that spot, I often tell them to go back to the basics of self-care. So it's, make sure you get some exercise, make sure you're eating right, make sure you get good sleep, make sure you're breathing regularly throughout the day. Because when we get these negative emotions in us, they cause us to breathe shallow, which means our brain's not getting the oxygen it needs to operate well, which means you stay stuck in that, you stay locked into those negative emotions for longer than you need to. And then I had to kind of formulate an idea for what next.
So you answered the question, one of the questions I was going to ask, the what is positive psychology? So I'm not going to go back over that. And I am curious though, what is your purpose and mission today?
My purpose is to help men evolve out of that man box culture, to help men evolve past caveman status. I really think that we have lagged behind for a number of reasons. I mean, if you go back to that man box idea, for those listeners that don't, that concept is new to them, basically when we're kids, when we're boys, and this starts as early as 4 or 5 years, we learn, we internalize messages from society. Now, it could be from your father, could be from your mother, could definitely from peers and friends, could be from teachers or coaches. But the lessons are things like be invincible, be invulnerable, be self-reliant, don't feel, be competitive, be aggressive, be tough. But the biggest one to me is don't feel. And, let me just give you an example of that, because I really think that we men get cut off from 2/3 of the emotional spectrum, which damages us down the road. So when you're growing up, think middle school to high school, could be earlier though. If you show too much sadness or fear, someone will say something to you like, dude, stop being such a pussy. Don't be a little girl, or don't bitch. And please forgive the language, but that's what we get.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you get that a few times, and I don't think it takes many times, you jump back in the man box and you're like, shit, that hurts. I'm not doing that anymore, because we don't like to be embarrassed and humiliated. So you realize quickly, I'm not going to express that anymore in public. Then on the other side, if you show too much joy, love, romanticism, excitement, flamboyance, someone will say something like, dude, don't be so gay, don't be a fag. And you go, holy shit, I don't like that, how that feels. I'm not showing that anymore. And so what are we left with as men that we can publicly display without fear of humiliation? There's 3 things I would argue. We've got stress, because when I say I'm stressed, it implies I'm busy and important. We've got lust, because that's normalized socially. She's so hot, I do her. And the big one, some degree of anger. And as adults, the vast majority of our emotions get funneled through that anger lens. And that's what we exhibit. And for instance, depression in men comes out as irritability. I've seen guilt and shame come out as anger. I've seen embarrassment come out as anger. I've seen anxiety come out as anger. And then we get into a relationship, and the biggest complaint I hear from wives is, I can't connect with my husband. And we, in many ways, the reason I wrote the book back in 2005 was that I realized I went through a PhD program and I'm still an emotional idiot. What can I do to change that? And so I started doing research and exercises to become more emotionally aware, more emotionally literate.
So give us an example, if you will, of what some of those exercises look like.
Well, I think, the biggest one starts with just awareness to the idea. Because I think when we can receive the idea without defensiveness, which is often our first response to criticism, real or perceived, we can go, huh. And in fact, there's a great quote by Bradley Whitford, who is an actor on The West Wing.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, whenever I get criticism from a director, I go through 3 stages in my head. The first one is, fuck you. The second one is, you suck, or sorry, I suck. And the third one is, wait, what? And I think that's brilliant, because it's a very simple framework to go through to ask yourself, where am I in response to this criticism or feedback? Am I externalizing my anger at someone else? Am I internalizing my anger? Or am I at that spot where I can actually consider the feedback?
Interesting.
So to find some way that you can hear the idea without defensiveness is a big deal. And then once you become aware, like, maybe that's true of me, then you can start to explore it with curiosity and non-judgment. So one of the first tools is something like mindfulness, where you sit and allow whatever's arising to arise without judgment by focusing on the breath. That alone will take a couple of years. There's other things like just being curious about what other emotions are out there. I was talking to a guy at the FBI, and I was like, I imagine if I'm at the FBI and I'm walking through the hallways and I ask people, hey, how you doing? What's going on? the typical answer is going to be good. And if it's not good, it's something like not so good. And that's it. And that's the extent of the vulnerability and authenticity that you're going to get from a population like that. And he's like, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Hmm.
And I think that's true of most men. So it's not a big stretch. So, you ask a man, how are you feeling really? Good. And it's like, so, okay, well, what other emotions are there? Because good isn't even really an emotion.
That's right.
Are you feeling positive or negative? Are you feeling, highly aroused or energized or low energy? Is it sadness? Is it melancholy? Is it depression? Is it awe? Is it relaxation? Is it surprise? I mean, so what are some more emotion words that you could use to pin down how it is you're feeling right now? And, I was interviewing Dr. Dan Tomasolo, who just wrote Learned Hopefulness. And he was saying one of the best exercises you can do is to simply stop several times during the day and just ask yourself, what am I feeling?
Hmm.
And the interesting thing in research is the answer to that doesn't matter. Just the act of stopping and asking the question builds metacognition, or thinking about thinking. It also builds emotional literacy. Now, why should you care about emotional literacy? Well, the thing is that there's research from UCLA that shows that simply by putting the right emotional label or word on what you're feeling, it helps to dial down the volume or intensity on that emotion.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. And if I remember correctly, back from earlier years when I was studying neuro-linguistic programming, there was a component of that used a similar process of labeling the emotions and changing the not only the visual side of it, but the auditory side and the kinesthetic side, and really changing the story or the movie in your
Mm-hmm.
mind. As you were talking about this, and emotions and the kind of responses that men give, are you seeing those responses changing in light of the pandemic? So are people connecting more on a human level? Are we checking in with people, and are you getting a deeper response than just good?
Yes. I think that, I've never been busier than I have since the pandemic. And that's true of therapists and mental health professionals across the world. I think that people are really struggling with stress and overwhelm and anger. Domestic violence is way up, fear, anxiety. And so I think people are tapping into more authenticity and less bullshit.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that people are looking for tools right now to help them manage their internal landscape, their thoughts and feelings. I mean, right now we've got COVID in California plus historic wildfires. I mean, we can barely breathe the air. And so, there's layers upon layers of stress that have been added just to our normal stressors from 6 months ago.
The great thing is that there are resources available like you that others can come to find out what those tools are, right? How can I learn how to process what's happening? How can I do the inner work and have someone that can guide and coach me through this? It seems it's when someone doesn't see hope, right, and doesn't know
Mhm.
where to turn and doesn't have anyone to speak with. What a sad state of affairs.
Well, and that's one of the problems that we men have is that because we're socialized to be self-reliant, we are really uncomfortable to ask for help when we need it, which leads to, a greater percentage of successful completed suicides for men than women. It means that we deal with depression, but it's not diagnosed as depression because we externalize that pain. So it looks more like anger or irritability, but it creates a lot of problems for us. And I mean, I remember, just to give you an example on the physical level,
Mm-hmm.
growing up, I had a friend whose dad was pretty hardcore, um, typical male. And he would pull out his own teeth in the garage with pliers when they had cavities because he just didn't want to go to the dentist. And my dad was the dentist.
Oh my gosh.
So he knew him.
Wow.
But, that's self-reliant at one level. But if you think of self-reliance on a 1 to 10 scale, that's a 10, and it's not healthy. And so where are you on that scale of self-reliance? And, maybe do you want to come down to a more reasonable level of 6 or 7? And I think there's a lot of traits like that that we can look at that are related to masculinity. And, I think there's a lot of good masculinity. However, I think that some of it requires dialing down some of these traits a little bit greater awareness around them. And the other thing I want to say before I forget is, to those men that are listening right now, this is not your fault. You did not ask to be socialized in this manner. It's just how it works right now. So, I like that idea because I think it takes us off the hook a little bit and maybe can reduce the defensiveness so that we can look at some of these topics with greater curiosity.
Yeah. I look back over the years, and it's taken me quite a long time to be able to have the more feeling type conversations with men, with women as
Mm-hmm.
well. But that that bias, that in that box that you refer to, that man box, I can recognize that so easily, and there's no blame to go
Yeah.
around, right? It's just, it seems that it's a cultural thing, perhaps, and maybe you've studied
Yeah.
other cultures and different countries and how that impacts uh, a similar type of situation. But it's a process to break down those barriers. It
It's a
truly
long
is.
process. Yeah,
Oh my
because it's
gosh.
it's as close to us as the air we breathe, and so we don't even see that it's there. But, to your point of whether or not it's kind of nature or nurture,
Hmm.
I think the best arguments right now argue that it's more learned, it's nurture. And the way they get to that conclusion is that there's certain island cultures like Tahiti where there's not the same split in terms of masculinity and femininity. It's evenly distributed across genders. And they think that that's because resources are plentiful and war is not a threat. So if war is not a threat, we don't have to socialize our young boys to be aggressive and tough to fight for us. And if, resources are plentiful, it's the same thing. You don't have to compete for the resources.
Mm,
So they socialize their boys in a different manner.
interesting.
And so, for instance, in Samoa, it's masculine to provide for the family and cook for the family, just as an
Interesting.
example.
So you have mentioned a wise saying before: you need to tell your stories after you've healed and not from a
Mm.
place of an open wound. Tell us what that means to you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was my saying. I think I might have borrowed that from someone. But I do love the saying. And I think that, I went through a contentious divorce, 2010 to 2013, that, in my opinion, didn't need to be contentious at all. And um, it just wasted time and energy and money to litigate it. And so I really struggled with that idea for a while because I was angry for a while. I lost contact with 2 of my adult children. They were alienated from me. My ex-wife was bad mouthing me around town, and she would get on the stand and prevaricate, to put it politely. Um, and it was really difficult to not bash her, to not tell that story from a place of anger. And I really had to work on forgiving her, practicing loving kindness, wishing kind thoughts upon her, to over time let go of that anger and tell the story from a more objective place, a more emotionally neutral place. um, and now what I try and do is just stick to the facts, the objective facts, and I keep it very brief. And there's, for the people that are out there struggling right now, there's a great concept, and I've found this to be true in my own life, that anything you're struggling with right now, whether it's divorce, or your kids don't talk to you anymore, or you're in financial hardship, or you're battling cancer, anything you're struggling with right now, in 5 years time, odds are that you're going to discuss this situation in 2 sentences or less. And that's true. I mean, I went through a shitty divorce in 2010 to 2013. And at the time, it consumed me.
I'll bet. So I have to ask this question because in, one of the phrases that I use in my world is that everything is my fault. I
Mm.
own what happens. I own what happens in business. I own what happens in my life. I have to look in that mirror every day and I realize that, there are a lot of areas where I'm not always showing up as my best self. So when you look
You
back,
too?
yes, can you imagine? So when
Damn
you look
humanity.
back, well, when you look back on a situation like that, and now you have a different perspective, right? You're looking at it through different optics than at the time that you were in it. Are you able to see where there are areas that you own it, right?
Oh yeah.
Hey, look, had I been self-aware enough, let's say, that I could have done certain things differently?
Yeah, I think, and that actually was before the divorce, before we even separated, where, my wife at the time said, you've got an anger problem. And I was like, after I went through the stages of fuck you, I suck, wait, what? I was like, okay, well, let me look at that. Like, maybe that's true. I don't know. Cause I feel like I'm responding to your anger. But if you say I've got an anger issue, I'll take that on. Like, let me look at that. And that's partly why I got into anger management, was because I needed the tools initially. And I think it's true. I think that I was getting too angry. I think that I was yelling at times. I think that anger would overtake me and it would be hard to think clearly and rationally. Um, and the beautiful thing about that, doing your own work, is I got to the point where I could stay calm even when my ex-wife was yelling at me for something I didn't do. And when you do get to that point, it becomes very apparent where the anger problem is. Now, I'm not saying I didn't have an anger problem, but it's really clear when someone's yelling at you. And then I was like, I remember thinking in my head, like, this has nothing to do with me. Like, I've done nothing wrong. Just breathe, stay calm. This isn't your shit.
Not easy to do.
And I would still get the physiological changes, like my chest would tighten, my heart rate would go up. But I could, counter that by reminding myself to stay calm, breathing. So it's kind of this tug of war internally, but
Yeah,
I'm not acting out in anger.
interesting. So the tools that you learned allowed you to control more of your thoughts and your emotions and your
Yeah, I would say manage.
responsiveness. Manage, not control and manage.
Control's more absolute, because I
Right.
don't I don't think even now that I control all my thoughts and emotions.
Mm.
I'm much better at it, but it's not 100%. I still get hurt.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up meditation, and I've found through my meditation practice that it has allowed me to be more self-aware of my thoughts and those patterns that I go through. They're always there, but at least
Uh-huh.
it allows me to stop for a moment, take that step back, like you were talking about, and question, right? Just
Yeah.
allow it to come and then allow it to exit, but realize that they're there and not just have that controlling everything that I do without paying attention to it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important step, because I think prior to that we believe the thoughts in our head are real and true. And at this point in my career, I would say that well over 60% of the thoughts in my head are complete and utter bullshit.
Mm,
That they're just lying to me. And I also like the idea in meditation that you can't stop the thoughts from coming, but you can change how you react to them. Now, I would say, if you're a Tibetan Buddhist monk who's meditating over 10,000 hours, yeah, you could probably stop those thoughts. But you and me, I'd say probably not. And I really like the idea of the first voice versus the second voice, that it's the second voice that is the most powerful. So the first voice in my head is that old emotional, you know, man box culture, stuff I learned as a child. It's that voice saying things like, you're a dumbass, or you're a loser, or nobody likes you. And I think those thoughts, or thoughts like them, we're always going to have those negative thoughts. But I really like the idea that it's second voice that is the most powerful. So one of the ones that I've had in my head for years is, you're an idiot or you're a dumbass, even after I had a PhD and wrote a book, which doesn't make any sense, but
No.
it's still there. So I'd have that thought of, I'm a dumbass. And I'd done enough work where when I hear that thought, now I can say, yeah, I've seen that thought before. I know it's not true. I'm just going to let it go. Versus, if I look for evidence to support that thought, I can find it because
Oh
I've
yeah.
done stupid shit in the past. I've hurt people, I've made mistakes. But if I do that, it starts this negative emotional thought spiral that just torches the emotional quality of that hour or that day. Whereas if I get unhooked from it and just let it kind of float on down the stream of consciousness, it's no big deal.
That's a gift to be able to do that. And it takes a lot of practice. But the great thing is it can be done.
Well, and we have time to practice right now.
Yes, that is true. So let's move away from anger for a moment and let's go to happiness. So
Okay.
can we geek out for a moment or two on the science and the neurochemicals that affect happiness? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things that I think that really helps, one of the things I talk to a lot of clients about is the sympathetic nervous system versus parasympathetic nervous system. So, you've got the autonomic nervous system, the nerves running through the spine, and the nerves branch out through the spine to every organ in the body. Now, that splits into two systems. The sympathetic nervous system is all about the stress response. If we're a car, that's the gas. It's the fight, flight, freeze response. Versus if we go to the parasympathetic nervous system, that's the relaxation response. It's rest and digest. If we're a car, those are the brakes. And so one of the things I find with everyone that I work with and everyone in this valley is we're all really good at stepping on the brakes. Or sorry, we're all really good at stepping on the gas.
Right.
We're terrible at stepping on the brakes. And the stress response is designed to go on, off, on, off, on, off, not on or on. And that's typically what we do is we just get going and we never really turn it off. We never fully relax. In fact, a lot of people that I talk to confuse relaxation with tiredness. And if we do a relaxation exercise, they just fall asleep, which, maybe they need. But so I think one of the big things is training ourselves to get back to that relaxation response when things are calm so that we can do it, or we have a chance of doing it when things are tense. And I remember there's a story of a mindfulness class that was being taught in a fifth grade. And my fiance was actually teaching this class. And she said, does anyone know why we practice breathing when things are calm? And this really smart fifth grade girl says, well, I imagine it's like the fire drill, that we practice the fire drill when things are calm so we know what to do in case of emergency. And it's like,
brilliant.
Wow, you're absolutely right. Can I steal that? Because, we really need to practice these things when things are good. So we know where to take our body and our mind, where to return them to when we're struggling. So I could go into cortisol and epinephrine or norepinephrine and serotonin, but that to me is about as technical as I get.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. So some of the tools that we would use to move us to the parasympathetic nervous system would be that deep breathing, perhaps meditation.
Progressive muscle relaxation.
Okay.
So mindfulness, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation. One of the ones I love is loving kindness meditation. And, all of these are 3,000 years old. The loving kindness one has about 10 years research behind it now. And it's interesting because one of the research findings is that it helps us to cultivate more frequent positive emotions. And it's basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's, get in a comfortable place, take some deep breaths. Now, imagine someone that loves you very much. Now, I want you to wish kind thoughts upon them in your mind's eye. So it's things like, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live life with ease and well-being. And you repeat that. And then you go to the two of you together. Now wish kind thoughts upon the two of you together. May we be happy. May we be healthy. And then you go to you alone, which is really hard for a lot of people. Wish kind thoughts upon yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. I like to throw in things like, may I feel worthy, because I think a lot of us struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's different ways you can go with it. But one of my favorite ways is, if you're a little bit experienced, now think of someone that you're having difficulty with. Wish kind thoughts upon them. And I tell you, I use these phrases over and over and over when I was in court and my ex-wife was on the stand. And I just kept thinking, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live life with ease and well-being. And one of the beautiful things about it is it calms your own physiology. So it brings your heart rate down. It relaxes your muscles. It eases your tension in your jaw.
Yeah, I love that. The loving kindness meditation is one that I typically use daily.
There you go.
And
It's a fantastic one. It's my favorite.
yeah, it truly is. I take it one step further and I open it up to really the rest of, I'll start with my community and then I open it up to the rest of the world, and I'm envisioning.
Yeah.
Right? I can see, everyone, and then I'm wishing loving kindness and happiness and no suffering, things along those lines.
You can go to everyone in the world and then every creature in the world. And I think those, and it research shows that it makes for a more compassionate person, a more understanding person, a more patient person.
So let's talk about mindset for a moment. How does mindset play a role in the work that you do?
It's funny because after doing this for a few years, I realized that, my job is really to help people make change, behavioral change, psychological change. And I kept running across two barriers. If you don't believe it's possible, or if you believe you can't change. So I would have like people that were severely depressed at times. And I remember I'd be, throwing tool after tool at them, here, let me try this. Let's try this. No, won't work for me. Nope, I tried that already. No, that one would never work for someone like me. And you get a lot of yeah buts. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but not going to work. And so that's an example of the nocebo effect. And you've heard of the placebo effect, where a doctor gives you a sugar pill, says this will help your headache. You take it. There's no medicine in it, but because you believe it will help with the headache, it helps with your headache. So it's the power of expectation. It's the power of the mind. The nocebo effect is also true. So if I believe that something is not going to help me, odds are it's not going to help me. And so one of the things that I do now is I think it's like a 30-minute talk that I gave a few years ago on the power of mindset. And we've known for a while that, Carol Dweck's work on fixed versus growth mindset is record-breaking, earth-shattering, legendary. That, when I went to school, I was under the assumption that IQ was fixed. That if you're born stupid, you die stupid, you go through life stupid. If you're born smart, you go through life smart, you die smart. It just doesn't change. And I don't know where I got that assumption, but I got it somewhere. And then Carol Dweck from Stanford came along and showed that that's not quite true, that what's more important is how we think about intelligence. And she proved it with a group of 7th graders. And one group was a control group. The other group, she taught this growth mindset to. So the growth mindset is the belief that your intelligence can grow based on perseverance, hard work, and effort. And that if you come up against a topic that's difficult, it's not that you're not smart enough, it's that you don't have enough persistence, or maybe you need to come at the material in a different way. And I remember having the fixed mindset when I got to calculus in high school, and I was struggling to get like a B minus, and that had never happened before. And I thought, well, I guess I'm just not smart enough. I guess this is the end of my math career. I didn't think like, well, maybe I need to go talk to another student or talk to the teacher or get a tutor or check out, other resources. Then I took it again in college and I got a straight A. And I was like, holy shit, maybe I just needed repetition, which is another way to learn. So that's kind of the granddaddy of mindsets. And the beautiful thing about mindsets is it's just a decision. You become aware of a research-informed mindset that you know to be supportive for you, and you decide to adopt it. And it happens like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to believe in the growth mindset. Now, the caveat to that is mindsets are context specific. Well, what does that mean? It means that we have different mindsets at different areas of our life. So I might think math, I've got a growth mindset now. I might think with programming, I've got a growth mindset. I can learn it. I might think though, emotionally, I just can't change. Anger, I can't change that. That's just part of my DNA. For a lot of men, this is a big problem in terms of growth and development. I'm just a man. Love me or leave me. And so just be aware as you go throughout the day, kind of with curiosity and non-judgment, where do I have a growth mindset and where do I have a fixed mindset where I believe change isn't possible? And then from that, there's all these, in this talk, I go through another 4 or 5 areas of research showing the importance and power of mindset, which kind of blew me away when I did the research. I mean, I was really shocked because there's research that shows that mindset can help with pain management, weight loss, aging, which is way outside of I mean, that just is mind blowing to me, and stress.
Wow.
And so just to give you an example, the weight loss one, they took, I think it was Aaliyah Crum from Stanford again, who went to Ellen Langer, who's like a Hall of Fame researcher at Harvard or Yale. And Ellen said to her, well, you know, that exercise that you've been doing is a placebo effect, right? And Aaliyah had been playing a D1 sport and exercising, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a day to stay in shape for this sport. And that kind of pissed her off. She was like, well, what are you talking about? Like, I'm getting the benefits of exercise because I think I should. And Ellen said, yeah. Well, she probably went through those 3 stages that I've mentioned before. But so she went back, and the amazing thing is she found a way to test that hypothesis. So she went to a hotel chain and she found 80-ish hotel maids who did not see their work as exercise, but they were vacuuming, changing sheets, cleaning bathtubs and bathrooms 8 hours a day. So she split them into 2 groups. One was a control group. The other group, she taught that according to the Surgeon General, their work qualifies as exercise and broke down each task into calorie burns. So, you know, changing a bed, 150 calories, cleaning a bathroom, 300 calories. And they're doing that 8 hours a day. So she checked back in with them, I think it was 2 to 4 weeks later, and found that that experimental group had lost some weight, their hip to waist ratio shrunk, they were more engaged and satisfied with their work, and their blood pressure dropped. There was no other change.
Amazing.
Other than how they thought about their work.
Yeah. That is incredible.
And I think we're just on the cusp of this. We're just kind of scratching the surface here.
Well, I tell you, I'm so glad that you brought up Carol Dweck and her book Mindset, which is really a seminal book. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. And it's funny when I knew we were going to talk today, there were a couple of books that came to mind, and here was one of them. Didn't know you were going to mention it. Synchronicity, exactly. But I would encourage all of our listeners to get a copy of that book and read it. It's life-changing. And like you, I believed certain things. I thought that my IQ was what it was, and that defined my level of intelligence. And if I wasn't able to do something in particular, well, clearly it was because of my IQ, right? Or if I wasn't achieving the grades that I was capable of achieving in math, well, I must be bad at math, right? So it's those stories that we tell ourselves, but all of that it can be changed.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And so if anyone's interested in that talk, I think you can go to guidetoself.com. And I think if you sign up for the newsletter, I think you get a free copy of that 30-minute talk on it.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure that we link to that in the show notes. So speaking of books, and I mentioned Mindset being one that's had a significant impact, certainly on my life. What are 1 to 2 books that have really had a massive effect on your outlook on life?
I think Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse is one of my favorites, going way back, because it introduced me to the story of Buddha back when I was in college. And that's one I still have on my bookshelf. And there's very few books like that. It's interesting. A lot of books that I read in this one philosophy of literature course back at Pomona were amazing. Love in the Time of Cholera, um, amazing magical realism. But as far as, I mean, lately I've been reading a lot of books. I read The Tough Standard recently that just came out about masculinity and anger and violence. Ron Levant, who I'll be interviewing here in a couple weeks. So it's more about masculinity recently, but there's a great one, How Can I Get Through to You, is brilliant. And this was one of his big ones too. I don't want to talk about it, about male depression. I think he's one of the best couples counselors in the United States. He does great work. So those are a couple.
Okay, good.
And then there's other ones in positive psychology, like Authentic Happiness by Seligman.
Excellent.
I could go on and on.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a handful of them. Yeah, that's good though. I appreciate you bringing those up. So what are you most proud of?
One of the things that I'm most proud of is that anger management class online. That there's over 10,000 people that have gone through that class in the last 10 years. And to me, I look at that, and my parents always told me, make the world a better place than you found it. And that to me is a small way to make the world a better place, because each one of those people has a ripple effect on their family and friends around them. And the feedback I've got from people taking that class is moving. And so I feel humbled and proud at the same time of that.
Terrific. So before I ask my final question to you, it's amazing how quickly time goes. We're gonna have to schedule a part 2 of this, because there's so many other areas that I want to delve into with you. But what message do you want to leave our audience with?
I think, in keeping with my purpose, my meaning, it's to ask men out there to look at themselves with curiosity and non-judgment in an attempt to get better at being in relationship. And I remember when I started reading positive psychology, and one of the tenets of, or one of the foundational pillars of a happy, thriving life was relationships. I was like, son of a bitch, like, now I got to go be nice to people and make friends, because I can be a little introverted, maybe a little curmudgeonly, but it's true. And I think that it's a really, really good goal for all of us to strive to be better in relationship, and to live life according to values and ethics. That seems to be the way to lead the most pleasant, least painful, most rewarding life that we can.
Powerful. So, and I will ask you one final question. How can our audience connect with you? So if we want to see any of your courses, if we want to engage with you, what is the best place to go?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. The podcast is The Evolved Caveman, and that's wherever podcasts are found. There's the evolvedcaveman.com site, and there is guidetoself.com. And then I'm on Instagram under, I think, The Evolved Caveman. And you can email me at john@guidetoself.com.
Perfect. And again, as I mentioned before, we will link to each of those locations in the show notes. So here is my final question to you. What is one of the greatest gifts that life has given you that you didn't realize at the time?
Genetics. And here's the reason I say that. I talk to a lot of men that are smart and accomplished and successful, and everyone that I've ever talked to agrees with the statement, stupid people are annoying. And the funny thing about that, and I've done that too, right? And the funny thing about that is we can all be stupid at times. So, no one has a stranglehold on stupidity. But I always talk to them about this idea that, look, you were born winning the genetic lottery. You're smart, you're good looking, you're physically fit, you didn't do anything to earn that. Now, you might have worked hard since then, but you got the raw material through no effort of your own. And so, what I want to ask you or beseech you is to use that with some compassion and grace to treat others who maybe didn't win the same genetic lottery with greater patience and kindness and respect. So I'm thankful for what I was born with, and I try to remind myself of kindness, to be kind.
Beautiful. So, Dr. John, thank you so very much for joining us today. It's truly been an honor and a pleasure. And when we spoke little over a month ago, I had a fantastic conversation with you. We covered a lot of ground then, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your insight and your kind heart with everyone here on this show. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And for the rest of you, thank you very much for watching. And if you found value in this episode, please like and share with your friends. And do make sure you subscribe to this channel. And until next time, stay healthy and optimistic. Keep learning and growing. And remember that transformative change in your life and business always begins with you, and nothing happens until you take action. And we'll see you on the next episode, Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.